Today, Singapore is one of the richest and cleanest countries in the world. But what's even more surprising is that it was once a country that was hit by extreme poverty, unemployment, drugs, crime, gambling, ethnic riots, overpopulation, illiteracy, lack of natural resources, and hostilities with neighboring countries. So how did Singapore become such a developed country within a span of 25 years? Singapore is a small island nation located in Southeast Asia. Its area is 710 square kilometers. It has a population of 5.92 million. It is the third most densely populated country of the world. The English name of Singapore is an anglicization of the native Malay name for the country, Singapura, which was in turn derived from the Sanskrit word for lion city. Singapore has multi-ethnic population with a strong emphasis on unity and national identity. With a multicultural population and in recognition of the cultural identities of the major ethnic groups within the nation, Singapore has 4 official languages: English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. There are people from 5 major religions: Buddhist, Christians, Muslims, Taoists, and Hindu, and there are a small population of people from other different religions. Second largest group is the people who do not believe in any religion, the atheists. In early days, Singapore was a trading port under the influence of both the Majapahit Empire and the Siamese kingdoms, and was a part of the Indosphere. Throughout the history, it was occupied by an Indonesian ruler, Portuguese, Dutch, and in 1819, British East India Company. In 1819, British statesman Stamford Raffles negotiated a treaty whereby Johor would allow the British to locate a trading port on the island. Raffles had decided that Singapore would be a free port. As news of the free port spread across the archipelago, Bugis, Peranakan Chinese, and Arab traders flocked to the island. In order to generate much-needed revenue, British officers started selling licenses for gambling and the sale of opium. Singapore started becoming famous for illegal activities. People from different countries came here and took opium, played gambling, did the slave trading. Commercial sex workers operating violence had increased very much. The traders entering from this route saw Singapore as a home for all their illegal crime, and Britishers saw the people as a low-wage labor. During World War II, Singapore was invaded and occupied by the Japanese Empire from 1942 to 1945. After the Japanese surrender to the Allies on the 15th of August 1945, Singapore fell into a brief state of violence and disorder. Looting and revenge killing were widespread. Much of the infrastructure had been destroyed during the war, including electricity and water supply systems, telephone services, as well as the harbor facilities at the Port of Singapore. There was also a shortage of food, leading to malnutrition, disease, and rampant crime and violence. High food prices, unemployment, and workers' discontent culminated in a series of strikes in 1947, causing massive stoppages in public transport and other services. When the Japanese surrendered, Singapore reverted to British control, with increasing levels of self-government being granted, resulting in Singapore's merger with the Federation of Malaya to form Malaysia in 1963. However, social unrest, racial tensions, and political differences between Singapore's governing People's Action Party, PAP, and Malaysia's Alliance Party resulted in Singapore's expulsion from Malaysia. Singapore became an independent republic on the 9th of August 1965. The key turning point came after independence in 1965. The newly formed government, led by Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, implemented a series of ambitious development strategies. The big challenge was shortage of food, malnutrition, disease, and rampant crime and violence. High food prices, unemployment, and people were divided into community, and Singapore as a nation didn't have any relation with each other. In 1970, Prime Minister Lee developed the Housing and Development Board, which brought the land and made huge housing units and gave houses to those who lives in slums in very cheap price. And government purposely had allotted building in mixed population so that people get united in the area in which they were living by making different communities. And Prime Minister Lee knew that if they want to end the discrimination regarding religion, then they had to stop talking about any one religion or community. They will have to create equal respect and opportunities to every religion. And if they have to end it, then they will have to start from school level, so that they need to end it in root level. At that time, children used to go to school according to their community. To deal with this, Prime Minister Lee built the government school with better infrastructure and facilities than them and offer with low fee. And in school also government was focusing how to respect all the religions and live in unity. Even in the fancy dress competition, if there's a Chinese kid, then they would perform in Malay's traditions dress, so they developed this type of culture in school. Now, Prime Minister Lee was successful in uniting the country, but the economy was dependent on tin and rubber productions, which was in control of Malaysia because it was the biggest importer. With this, there weren't any natural resources in Singapore on basis of which they could make a money. And security was handled by Bertizer. He tried to make the Malaysia happy by making different policies. He knows that all the policies will fail if the corruption remains, so he formulated the Strike Act regarding the prevention of corruption. Government increased the salary of the governmental employee salary, politicians and ministers on high range to stop the corruption. The Prime Minister of Singapore is the highest paid Prime Minister of the world. And then he making policies regarding the foreign investment by lowering the tax so the Singapore economy will revise and people will have both money and job. Prime Minister Lee later co-founded the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, on the 8th of August 1967 so that all of them support each other economically and maintain the peace in the region, and if anyone faces a difficulty then they would support them. Prime Minister Lee makes the different policies in favor of company and called to different nations to set up the company in Singapore, and within 2 years more than 150 companies come to Singapore and more than 32,000 jobs are created. Even after that they started setting up big oil refining industries. And did in such a way that Singapore became world's third oil refining center. Further economic success continued through the 1980s, with the unemployment rate falling to 3% and real GDP growth averaging at about 8% up until 1999. During the 1980s, Singapore began to upgrade to higher technological industries, such as the wafer fabrication sector, in order to compete with its neighbors which now had cheaper labor. Singapore Changi Airport was opened in 1981 and Singapore Airlines was developed to become a major airline. The Port of Singapore became one of the world's busiest ports, and the service and tourism industries also grew immensely during this period. Singapore emerged as an important transportation hub and a major tourist destination. Singapore's move to increase attractiveness as a tourist destination was further boosted in March 2010 with the opening of Universal Studios Singapore at Resorts World Sentosa. In the same year, Marina Bay Sands Integrated Resorts was also opened. Marina Bay Sands was billed as the world's most expensive standalone casino property at 8 billion Singapore dollars. On the 31st of December 2010, it was announced that Singapore's economy grew by 14.7% for the whole year, the best growth on record ever for the country. Singapore attracts a large amount of foreign investment as a result of its location, skilled workforce, low tax rates, advanced infrastructure, and zero tolerance against corruption. It was the world's fourth most competitive economy in 2023, according to the International Institute for Management Development's World Competitiveness Ranking of 64 countries, with the highest GDP, PPP, per capita. Singapore's GDP to be $814 billion. Singapore's development is a remarkable story of transformation from a resource-poor nation to a highly developed one. So, is Singapore truly the #1 country in Asia? Rankings can differ, but there's no doubt it's a regional powerhouse. Singapore's story is an inspiration for developing nations around the world. It demonstrates the power of strong leadership, strategic planning, and a commitment to education and infrastructure investment. What are your thoughts on Singapore's development? Let us know in the comments below.